Thank you, and hi everybody. So I've been listening the whole day, and it's been fantastic. I want to echo the previous speaker saying that to meet people face to face again and do things like this is really, really exciting. So my name is Stina Linderoth, and I will talk to you about mechanisms of methods. I will not talk any science at all, so I will only base this on my experiences within two rather unconventional startups, or I don't even know if you could call them startups, if it's carve-outs or scale-ups or so within big organizations. So about myself, I have a background as an IT consultant, worked within IT 20 years now, I realize. Makes me feel really old. But I spent the last about 6 years, before I joined my current company, Örebro, I spent the last 6 years with Volvo Cars. So I'm guessing most people know what Volvo Cars do. Örebro may be a little bit more new to people, and it's actually a joint venture between Volvo Cars and Geely, producing different kind of powertrain systems, both electrification and combustion engines, to solve any types of mobility issues. I'm not like Jenny, a realist. I'm the optimistic kind of person. I think everything is possible. So I'm really excited to stand here and talk to you guys today and tell you about my experiences within transformation journeys more than actually maybe agile journeys. So I will share today both the backgrounds of the dilemmas that I've been part of, and then of course what we did and how we went about it. But then most of all, maybe the important learnings, what the mistakes we made, because there were a lot. And what are the things that we have found out afterwards were the one mechanisms that really worked for us and that we've then continued to culture and really nurture and focus on when going on in our transformation journeys. And I really want to encourage questions, because it will be so much better to get your questions in the middle if you dare to put them out there. So, starting with the first dilemma situation. I mean, you know what Volvo does, right? But do you know what Care by Volvo is? Anyone? No? You know, Jenny? Yeah, it's Volvo Cars has always been like the traditional business. They develop, produce, manufacture cars, sell to retailers, and that's been their whole business. But then, quite a long time ago, there were those questions about, right, direct-to-consumer business, maybe that's something for us. Care by Volvo was a way of spearheading that. So it's a subscription model, and subscription is also something that's more and more actually looking at to the buyer patterns of today, getting more and more traction in the world. So why not sell a car as a subscription? We have a belief that cars is something that you really want to touch and feel and try and test drive. But what if that's not for everybody? What if some people just want to get from A to B in a really easy, hassle-free way? So it was started as a proof of concept, a company within the company. So the model itself, it's some compare it to private leasing, but it's actually a little bit more than that. So you get the car, you get the insurances, the tires, the services, everything. You have a 3-month flexibility, so you can give up and give notice in 3 months and then just turn in your car or change your car. So very flexible. So when we first started, there was a new small company founded within Volvo Cars. It was a lot of people from outside, but then the majority of what was actually going to be done and built was, of course, from the inside. So we had to utilize all the different existing departments as they were, and it was also being built on existing digital solutions. So it was new, and we had to go about it in an explorative way, but it was also really scary to the rest of the organization, because it challenged the way we've thought that the sort of buyer patterns have been for cars before. So there were new competences needed, new type of skill sets, even mindsets in some areas. And we had to get everybody moving towards the same kind of objectives, delivering the different type of both digital solutions, but also new processes, new ways of doing business. in a togetherness kind of way, built on what we had. So as normal, I mean, you've all seen the pictures of the iceberg, right? There's always a lot below the surface. So for us, this was so much new things that needed to get into place. We never had that direct-to-consumer relationship before. So there was a whole service organization that needed to be set up. We didn't own the cars before. We sold them to the retailers. They owned them and then sold them further. So now if we're going to let them out as a subscription, we needed to own them. We needed to refurbish them. We have to handle the whole fleet. So there were a lot of new types of businesses, new types of functions, but also the technical solution of how supporting the full consumer journey from ordering your car or your subscription to actually having it be built in the factory and then delivered and then serviced by the dealer network. It was all based on existing digital products. And most of those products were not built for the end consumer. Most of them had a completely different purpose when they were first built, and then they were configured into, you don't even want to know what it looked like. And the consumer journey was, of course, nice and shiny and bright on the outside. But then on the back end, what did it really look like? So we had more than 50 product teams involved. They were scattered out in the whole organization because, of course, we didn't do a reorg when starting this up. We had to prove the model first. There were a lot of different suppliers. We had 4 big MSA suppliers at the time. Most of the products were standard solutions configured into something that would not go as standard anywhere else. There was only about 20% of bespoke products developed within Volvo Cars. And then, of course, we had a really high number of products and solutions that were their main purpose was something completely different. We just happened to use it in our consumer journey. So easy, right? Moving on to the next dilemma situation. So this is then a startup that's been carved out of a company. So a startup with a 114-year-old history. Easy. So this dilemma, it was more of going from a department to becoming a standalone company. There was a decision to make this a standalone business a few years back, and then nothing really happened. But eventually there was a realization that, all right, we can't just take the R&D department and move that out. We probably need HR, finance, all those nice little bubbles we saw in a previous presentation of an old-time way of organization. So all those, marketing, communication, digital. So this had to be built up. New organization, new skill sets, recruitment, everything, new culture, new way of looking at the world. Being used to being part of a company with 45,000 people, going to a company of 3,000 people. So I talk about that as a small company. Maybe not to most people, but for us it's really small. Well, the ones of us originating from Volvo Cars. So at the same time as trying to get this in place, of course we had to get new business. We are building the engines for Volvo Cars, both electric and combustion, but we also, of course, want to look at how can we solve the future problems of power in general. Electricity might not be the only answer. There's biofuels. There's a lot of different solutions. We really want to make sure that we are a company that supports that. So we need other types of business. We need other types of invention and innovation. So doing this, and then digital transformation on top, right? So having the digital landscape being part of a larger company, we had to carve that out and make it our own. So doing that at the same time as establishing the ways of working around both Agile, but also in the general organization as such. And at the same time as delivering, because our factories are running. We got one in Örebro, one in China, still running the same pace. Customers expecting things to be delivered at the same pace. For me, coming from digital, my customers at the business side, expectations, same pace, while doing all of this. So how do you then build a really efficient, agile business when you have to build some things from a blank sheet of paper? My own area, the commercial area, we didn't have anything. So lucky, I did not have to copy anything from the legacy organization. I can build it from start. So maybe that's where the Agile methodology really fits in and is more easy to implement. But then looking at the other areas, like the manufacturing areas, logistics areas, all of those, copying some of the applications from Volvo cars, making it our own, because we only want the good stuff, right? Don't want to bring all that manual integrations, all those things. So transforming it while then making it our own. Easy? No. One step at a time, really, really respectful of the complexity it brings, but also the magnitude of change for the people involved. Because this is more a story about change management and transformation than it is about Agile, I think. So then what did we do? I'll do a dramatic pause just for effect. So both of these scenarios driving really high complexity, being dependent on multiple moving parts in the organization, we needed to get everybody sort of working in the same pace, the cogwheels turning at the same pace. And this was not only, of course, the digital deliveries, because they were all dependent and really interlinked with the business deliveries. For example, when we did something in Care by Volvo that was called retailer-assisted sales, because it was not only online, some of the subscriptions bought were, of course, sold by the retailers, because we still had those people that really wanted to test drive the cars. Then, of course, the retailers have to have a tool to support the buying process. So when we did that, the tool itself, one thing, but the actual reimbursement model for how did we actually pay the dealers to support us in that purchase, that had to be developed at the same time. So we really had to synchronize the business deliveries together with the digital deliveries and make sure everybody was focusing on the same target, same objectives, and really get that feeling of creating something together. And this goes for both of those scenarios, where in Care by Volvo, the organization as such was huge from the start, whereas in Örebro, a little bit smaller, but the synchronizing is just as important. We did do two different approaches, though. So in Care by Volvo, we looked at General Stanley McChrystal's theory around team of teams, a book from 2015, where he talks about that large organizations handling in this uncertain times of complexity, they're not built for having teams being really agile, adaptable, and resilient. Those are all traits of small teams, of agile teams that we know. And the team of teams philosophy then is, how do you take the characteristics of a small team and connect teams together and implement it in larger organizations to get that same kind of traction as you would do in a small team. But of course, we looked at the theory and then we made it our own, because in my opinion, that's the only way to adopt any theory or method. You have to look at what's the problems where we stand, what do we have to address. So to us, we looked at what is it that we really need to deliver right now. And then we based a team of teams around that. So a team of team was people that we drew out from the different parts of organization, and to make sure that we had the right competences focusing on that specific purpose or mission or so that we needed to get done right now. And we talked about organization before, and I really like the organizational depth concept. I will steal that. I know those guys have left by now, but I will definitely steal that in the future. Because we realized that reorganizing would not solve our problem. Even if we could have influenced, I mean, I mentioned before, Volvo Cars, 45,000 employees. When you do something new, it's not like you walk up to the CEO and say, hey, we need to reorganize. We've got the idea of how to solve it. You really don't have that possibility. So we needed a philosophy that would work no matter what the organization looked like. And in the early days of Care by Volvo, that was team of teams. So we looked at SAFe, we looked at Scrum. We had so many different types of Agile maturity within the organization. Victoria was mentioning earlier her experience in Silicon Valley. We did have a satellite team there with about 5 product teams. They had a completely different Agile maturity and methodology than what was implemented in parts of Volvo Cars. You might have heard about Agile transformation in Volvo Cars, and there's been a lot. And then I only know the parts where I've been involved. But in this area, we had it all. We had the big SAFe implementations. We had teams that were running projects. And then we had the real Agile teams in parts of the Silicon Valley office, but also in other parts of the organization. So we tried to look at SAFe in terms of adopting the planning sessions. We didn't call it PI planning, we call it big room planning, because some were really allergic to SAFe in our organization as well. So we did it on a quarterly basis, as most do. And that's before each of those planning sessions, we looked at what are the big value inputs we need right now. And then we decided what team of teams that we were going to keep and what we needed to change. So they were semi-persistent, because most of the team of teams actually lived on for several years or so, some only for a specific initiative. So one of our sort of definitions of a team of teams was that they were set up when we had a clear purpose or initiative, that one or more that they would run, and that it was a little bit of a larger chunk of work that needed to get done, and that it would involve multiple product teams. And you may ask, initiative, don't we have like epics or strategic themes or whatever we want to call it instead? But when you have one team calling an epic and defining it in one way, and another team defining it in a completely different way, and a third team working in a project, and then a fourth team saying, we don't even work with epics, we only work with features, there was really no way of getting along. So we said, we'll call it initiative. It's not so politically charged. People don't really care about that concept. And we made it our own definition and something that everybody sort of could buy into. So this is then how we worked with it within Care by Volvo. But at the heart, of course, was to have the synchronized heartbeat with a joint cadence, but only on the higher level. What the teams did, how they did their planning, that was up to them. We just wanted to make sure that the overall picture was synchronized in a good way. And then coming to Örebro, which is then at a completely different maturity level. We definitely have teams that have Agile experience, both in software development, but also in our hardware development. They were part of the Volvo Cars SAFe implementation. But most of them didn't really know why it was implemented or what they were supposed to achieve. So when we first started talking about bringing it all together and trying to create a delivery engine in Örebro, some of the teams told me, you know, Stina, in Agile you plan week 10, 22, 37, and 49. That's part of the Agile methodology. And so we realized quite quickly that they have been given a way of implementing Agile that was very much based on demand and control. This is how it looks. This is how we shape it. Now go ahead and do. So we wanted to take a few steps back. And one thing that is quite familiar to most of the people in the organization is programs. So we created a Becoming Örebro program. And then you might think, right, program, that's really contradictory to Agile. But it doesn't have to be. It's a way of boxing it in and scoping it and making sure that we have the same direction. So we created a cross-functional program. It was based on the same kind of principles as Team of Teams and the delivery engine in the same way. Really clear objectives and the same principles when it came to focusing both on business deliveries and digital at the same time. So we set some initial principles, and here we're really at an early stage, so we still have a long way to go. But sort of creating the program for what we have within our own doors, making sure we have the right people to do the right things, use the culture and size as an advantage. As I said before, we look at ourselves as small with our 3,000 people because we've been part of that bigger thing. Learn and adapt the traits of agile teams and agile development as well. Really know why we do something, be clear and transparent with priorities, but also impediments. And then, as I mentioned in the beginning, really respect the impact it has on the organization and the magnitude of change. When you do these kind of transformations and you're doing a complete digital transformation with the actual applications used as well, it impacts everybody to a very large extent. So making the teams work agile in a very sort of quick way was not a solution in this case, but getting there step by step. So, of course, you could reason that you had the team of teams set up. That worked pretty well. Why not create the same kind of setup in Örebro? And looking at where we had a team of teams, it was impacting such a much larger part of the organization. We had multiple parallel initiatives ongoing at the same time. There was a really high pace. We had some really mature agile teams that could role model. So some of the things came really easy. But then there was so much of the organization impacted by everything. So the team of teams was a way to really handle that, to be able to cover everything. If you can't beat them, join them, they say. And we did it the opposite. If they can't understand us, then bring them in and make them part of team of teams instead. So that was one of the philosophies. In some of the planning sessions, we had more than 600 people at the same time. So there was a real big need of clarity and understanding of direction. In Team of Teams, we also had quite known customer personas. We know who the customer was that we were targeting, so it was a little bit more predictable what we needed to do. In the Örebro program, we're smaller. We can keep it together in a little bit more one program, making sure everybody understands the same thing at the same time. And then our customer persona is a little bit more unknown because we're still developing our future offerings. But the foundation is exactly the same. And if you would invite an agile coach to one of the situations and the other situation, they would say it's completely different. But the foundation is the same. It is the synchronizing the heartbeat, and it's focusing on the right agile mechanisms. And so far, it's working. I liked what one of the previous speakers talked about, not getting good but getting better. I don't think you'll ever get to that situation. Now we're done and now we're working the way we want to, because you would have learned so much during that journey, so you would move the target. So that's the philosophy that we are approaching now, that consistently change and adapt. There's not one way to do things. So then to the interesting parts. What did we do wrong, right? Learnings and mistakes. Autonomy, really important. In the large organization, when you have 50 product teams, can a team really be autonomous completely? Maybe, but in our experience, there was a lot of decisions made based on an autonomy that wasn't really there. So sometimes you gave the feeling of we talked about autonomy. We said we've got autonomous teams. They prioritize. They make the decisions. And then we said Norway released to market this day. With all that comes with that. And the product team that were part of that delivery, they were never part of making that decision, because that decision was made somewhere else. It was a business decision far away. Even though they were part of the same team of teams, it still happened. And the product team said, hey, all right, that sets our prioritization. There's no way we could challenge that, because there are business targets and there's the KPI set that we're going to sell these many subscriptions by this date. So that team wasn't autonomous. And then we had the other situations where it was such a long consumer journey with so many different products involved. Some of them, as I mentioned earlier, were constructed or built for something completely different. So their main stakeholder group was probably not Care by Volvo, it was something else. Of course, we were part of their PI plannings. We came with our epics and did the master planning with them and wanted to get that buy-in. And then functionality was built, but at the same time it was built over here because there was another team servicing another stakeholder group, and they wanted that functionality too, but in this other system. So there were a lot of those situations where the belief in a team being autonomous wasn't really true. So, of course, dependency is really important to know, but also really know who your main stakeholders are. I remember when it wasn't part of the Care by Volvo setup, but it was part of another part of Volvo Cars, and they'd say, hey, 3 years we've been working Agile. Now we found our stakeholders. 3 years we realized who it was. Before that, yes, we did the plannings, we got everybody in there, but now we know who the customer is. So a lot of examples of the false and misguided autonomy. We also have the one saying, sorry, next PI planning, 10 weeks, you can come back then. A lot of times. Next one. I'm speaking against you now, Jenny, because you said not the why, but I say yes, focus on the why, the what and the why over how, but not in the way of questioning the why, but actually providing the why from start. We had, before I actually joined the Care by Volvo part of Volvo Cars, I was part of the digital Agile transformation. We had about 15 Agile coaches in at one point. They spent a lot of time talking to each other on how to do things the best. Great group of people, very, very skillful. But when you have 3 Agile coaches standing in a corner talking about, should you really stand up or sit down in the dailies? You feel that there's something missing. If they would have done that discussion with some of our teams, maybe, but now it was just the 3 of them from 3 different consultant companies, by the way. So we realized quite quickly, and we also were fortunate enough to have leadership in the Care by Volvo setup that challenged the how pretty early. So we were forced to say, all right, it doesn't matter how you perform the ceremonies or how you name things or how you organize. If I could count the number of times I've heard, if you only organized according to the value streams, it would work. To us, that wasn't solving the problem. So we needed to focus on the what and the why. What are we delivering? Why is this important? What kind of ceremonies are we implementing? And why are we implementing them? If we couldn't say that, if we couldn't tell the organization of why we were changing the ways of working and what the benefit would be, then how could we get them on board? Some teams you got on board anyway because it was just like, all right, this is how we're going to do it. And they didn't really have time to reflect on why it was needed. They just did. But then you had the opposite that would challenge instead and say, all right, you just tell us to do all these things. We can't see the benefit, so we're not doing it. So we really try to, after a while when we realized this, try to focus on motivating every little thing that we implemented in terms of a template or a ceremony or a role or whatever, to really try to get them on board and make them feel part of deciding why we should do something or not. And then not be scared to take it away. We try this one thing, since we were so many teams, we tried this one thing that we called solution sync, where all the teams told each other what they were working on. For some, it was brilliant to get, specifically the managers, to get everything at one time, right? But for some of the teams, it was like, we're only doing a small part. I'm not impacted by that. I have to sit and listen for 3 hours while all the teams tell what they do. So we took it away and we redid it and tried a different way. And then, of course, we tried to do everything at once and too fast. And And when you have teams that have worked Agile since they started working, and you have teams that have never, and you tell them the same thing, I mean, any transformation means friction. It's a change. You have to respect that fear that would come with that, both from the mature Agile teams that were like pushed into a safe context, and the teams that never worked Agile and felt that, you know, projects are pretty damn good, and we could do it that way. So when doing or changing the way of working, believing that there's a methodology that will get you there, I don't believe in that. Those methodologies are there to help for sure, but pick a few things, start that, and then of course the feedback learnings and that learning or feedback loop and continuous learning, and adopt that into your adaptation of your way of working as well. So you really make sure that every new introduction is something that brings value, because we did a lot of this. So then, focusing on the things that didn't work or that we made mistakes around, then what did work? And this one is probably one that is at the heart of every Agile methodology or iterative approach. Focus on the value. And make sure that everybody knows the value. To make sure that we know what's prioritized right now. We did, in Volvo, we did the big room plannings, and we always started with our CEO at the time talking about the direction. And I can tell you that direction changed every 3 months because it was a startup, so we didn't know. And he said, you know, why, when he got from his executives, we want the 5-year plan, and then we also want the 10 to 15-year plan. That could be a little bit high level, but we still want it. And he said, I can't even plan for 6 months because we don't know how the business model is going to be received. So in the plannings, we started with him talking about the direction. And then we also presented these are the most important initiatives from the team of teams right now, and all the teams listening in. Because then we could do the rationale behind why is it important, what's the prioritization, and what are we expecting to get out of it. So really focus on the value. A no-brainer in Agile, right? And then the togetherness. It sounds really corny maybe, but to us, the feeling of being part of something bigger, to get that direction from the CEO and know that, you know, the thing I'm doing today, it's going to fit over here in this little piece of the puzzle. In the early days, we had a bit of a problem because you had the teams, they did most of our teams worked according to Scrum in one way or another. They did all the right things, but they didn't really know what the thing they prioritized was good for in the bigger picture. And if they got to know that, then it really worked. Celebrating them together as well. So really important to have a feeling of a joint purpose, a joint target. We're one team. We talked earlier about assume the best intentions. So always believe that everybody's doing their best and win as a team. Such an important feeling. And I know Jenny mentioned earlier as well, the planning together, understanding together, planning together, delivering together. And that's something that we really took to heart. So our big room plannings was not about the detailed PI plannings. It was about the understanding together. Why is this important? What will be the result? And then constant transparency and information. We had a catch-up session for the whole organization every week, half an hour. Everybody called in, talked about what are the sales figures right now, what's going on, what's the status on deliveries, both both digital and business, and then a few highlights and successes. And it was almost like you've seen those videos, right, from Microsoft when they do the dancing and stuff. It was always that kind of feeling, but every week. People were really proud to be part of that. It was such a good sort of atmosphere and feeling of accomplishing something. So the togetherness, really important. I have another example from Örebro when we said quite early on, right, we got this program, but we need to do the big room plannings in exactly the same way. Synchronizing the heartbeats, making sure everybody is sort of working in the same pace to one way or another. So our first big room planning, and in this we have a quite interesting cultural aspects, because half of the company was part of Volvo Cars and sort of got moved out, whether they wanted to or not. And the other half are people that has joined and say, hey, really interesting journey, I want to join. So we have a dual culture. And we have some people working with intent-based leadership. We have some people very much command and control in our leadership team. A really dynamic group of people. And when we did our first big room, all those leaders were there. And you could see them in the beginning, arms crossed, sitting, leaning back. And then after lunch, end of the day, you had the R&D manager up with Post-its and really active in the discussions. So just by doing that together in one room, and it could definitely be done online as well, but being together and really understanding together what we were trying to achieve, and then mobilizing in the smaller sections and getting the plan up and running together really made that change. And it has made the change in such a way that now when we're not quick enough to plan the next one, they're like, when is it coming? I don't have it in my calendar. When is our next big room? So it really created a feeling of accomplishing something together for us. And when you're in a company that is quite unsecure of where we're heading, I mean, it's not really sexy to be working in combustion engines right now. So, of course, there are other things that we are working on, but the fear in the organization and the uncertainty about the future is very big. So you have to really be respectful of that change. But the feeling of accomplishing this together and becoming our own company together has been vital for us. Flexibility is the third one. I believe there's no one-size-fits-all when in terms of agile methodologies or such. It would have been easy in some areas to say, hey, you started up a new company, you could organize according to the value streams, and yes, we did try. But since one of the learnings from Care by Volvo was that the organization didn't solve all our problems, we needed a philosophy that worked no matter what. We felt that when we can set it from scratch, we need to let the teams take it in their own pace. Because if you assume that everybody is starting in the same spot that you are, and everybody has the same knowledge, you probably lose a lot of the teams along the way. So we have focused on setting the sort of guardrails and guidelines, but inside those guardrails, the teams can very much work like they want to work. There are specifics that we want to have everybody have in common. Some of the nomenclature, of course, because we need to understand each other, so we talk about same things. And then some of the cadence, and then the interfaces. But if a team wants project managers, they can have project managers. It doesn't mean that they can't work agile. It's just that they're not working agile according to a specific methodology, and maybe they're not so mature yet. As long as we really encourage them to continuously learn and adapt and implement new things, they will get there eventually. So flexibility has been really important for us. We also know that we are working with a lot of different interfaces to the surrounding organizations. We're still quite dependent on Volvo Cars for some of our deliveries. So we need to have an interface that works with them as well. So hence the real focus on flexibility within the teams. Promoting the self-organizing teams more than anything, but making sure that they all understand what they're a part of. And then the most important thing of all, the collaborators, the people. And you have them in your organizations. I mentioned earlier the 15 Agile coaches we brought in. I've learned a lot from those Agile coaches. I am personal friends with a lot of them today. But in Örebro, we don't have any Agile coaches in. Of course, there is Agile knowledge within the organization. But if you really want to make it work, you need to find the collaborators that you already have in your organization. You could get the Agile coaches in to support those collaborators, but the people in your organization, they're key to the success. When collaborating, we talked earlier about speak up. And the culture, of course, is at the foundation and heart of any collaboration. And the question I asked Jenny about how do you get the people to really do the stuff too? Because it's easy to speak up. If you have succeeded in creating an environment where people feel safe to speak up, but it's also easy to say, we need to do this, or someone should do this. Specifically, if you come from an organization of 45,000 people and you're now only 3,000, you assume that there's a whole department handling whatever it might be. So, all right, why don't we need to do this. Let's get it done. All right, there's one person over in that corner working with that. Maybe we could ask her, or could we do it themselves? So we're really looking for the people who take the action as well. And I love the intent too, leadership style, because then you could also help people that has not experienced that kind of leadership when they do say someone needs to, and help them out in getting that done by saying, all right, who do you think should do it? Oh, there must be someone who's, all right, but maybe you got an idea, maybe can you take the first step, and to really make people get a feeling of it doesn't matter if it's within my little scope box where I used to work, I can actually step outside of that too. So collaborators are key. And we also talked about empowerment, and I love that we brought up that you can't empower people. That's like a contradiction, right? That's what you were saying. If you have collaborators that are willing to take action, they will empower themselves because they will get it done. They will see what's important and take those steps. So this journey for me, especially, and in both of those situations, it has never been the straight, clear road ahead, and will not be. And it's not the sort of straight road into the unknown or the winding road with the surprises along the way. Sometimes it's been all three, but most of all, it's been a little bit of like dig where you stand and do what you can. And we've had a lot of methodologies to help us on the way, but never looking at one saying this is the one that fits. So more looking into my favorite mechanisms then, making sure that we had these in place and constantly thinking about these. And I bet there's 4 or 5 more mechanisms that could easily go in here. And sorry for referencing to you all the time, Jenny, but you were talking earlier about, oh no, I lost it. Anyway, the mechanisms that I believe would cater for a really important, oh, got it back. Not mentioning Agile was what I was looking for. Everybody has a bit of a thought or some kind of relationship to it. Either you're scared of it, or you love it, or you've tried it, doesn't work, or whatever it might be. So we've actually tried to focus on, when talking about the change that we're wanting to make, to talk about the mechanisms instead of the actual methodologies, because this is something that people have a tendency to understand easier. And it doesn't matter if it's something that we've stolen from SAFe or Scrum or Kanban or anything else. We've got teams working in all of these right now. But if you get these mechanisms in place, and then, of course, the clear sense of direction, this is where we're going, and we're doing it together, then you really have a good basis for creating a delivery engine that will work over time and at scale. And I think that was all that I had, but I'm hoping there's a bunch of questions.
Yeah, hi. I'm just thinking about. I'm really having a hard time visualizing a big room planning with 600 people in. How did you do it?
The one with 600 was actually a digital one and online, but we had multiple ones with about 300 and 400 people. And the way we did it, we always started with, like I mentioned, the strategy of where we were going next, and a little bit of explanation of the bigger initiatives. And then we had each team had their corner. And since there was like the heart or core team of the team of teams, they also have the responsibility of inviting everybody who needed to be there. For example, if there was a product team that was not part of the organization, but they needed to come in to discuss a specific part of a feature or an initiative, maybe they would come in for an hour or so. Most of the people join in the first hour to listen in, and then they came and went during the day. But we actually did an analog plan on the wall with the strings and everything. It was about 20 meters long and about 3 meters high. And then we put it up in Miro. And we worked with it constantly, adapting, and then some other tools to support. But it did work really well, even though we were that many. And when doing it with 600 people, first time we were going to do it online, it was really scary. Because yes, online meetings, but then we realized that since it required a little bit more planning, both from us that facilitated, but even more from the teams, the outcome was actually better. Because when we did it face to face, since we didn't go into the detailed features or stories, it was more like the maybe on epic level we identified activities and dependencies. So it was quite easy to come in unprepared if you were part of the team. But when we did it online, it was difficult to not be prepared because they had to facilitate their own room or channel. But it worked.
Thank you.
I don't know if that was the answer, but.
So will you say more, Stina, about the resistance, maybe especially in Care by Volvo, because there were so many agile transformations in other parts of the organization, and what you all did in Care by Volvo was so pragmatic. Maybe just put a few words on
sure.
that.
I mean, because there was, and maybe you've heard about that because that's the one that gets mentioned most when you talk about agile transformation in Volvo cars. The whole R&D organization did an agile transformation. They implemented SAFe. And then there was an agile transformation within parts of digital that also looked at a SAFe implementation because it had to work with the R&D implementation. And then you had an organization that was more about the consumer-facing solutions. And those were the teams that were recruited most recently. And most of those guys, they worked agile forever. So then getting it to work as one, they were like, yeah, we're bigger, the SAFe people then, we're bigger, there's more SAFe teams, so they should also. Yeah, but they've worked agile forever, and they have a working way, so why should they have to? So there was a lot of resilience in between agile methodologies. But then we also had the resistance from some of the business teams who were used to saying, yes, this is what we want delivered at this time, at this point. And by the way, you're already late because you should have done that already. And that we experienced all the time. Even by the time I left, we didn't really get to that, even though there were improvements. But in the first big room, even though we talked so much about how it should be, and you don't put a post-it on someone else's swim lane if you haven't talked to them. There were like so many post-its on everybody else's swim lanes no one knew anything about. But in the second one, there wasn't. And in the third one, there was none. And then the fourth one, and then fifth one. So it did, when they saw the result, that's what made it work. And seeing that it didn't matter if one team planned according to SAFe and another one did it completely different way. And they could still sort of, we agree that this is what I need to deliver, and it's going to go in this sprint, so that means I can give you a date when that will be done, and then we have the dependencies to this other team who's doing it in their safe way. Then it worked. I don't know if that was answer to your question either, but...
Okay, looks like we don't have any more questions for now.
And by the way, we're recruiting at Örebro, so if you're interested... Thank you. Okay.